everyone. This is Tanya Devane with the Omnia Group. I want to thank you all for joining me today in regards to how to coach employees with different conflict resolution styles. Conflict is definitely a part of life, and it must be handled professionally and productively. And that's what this webinar is going to talk about. So, just like that in the opening page where I asked everyone, to kind of how would you define conflict, and we did get a couple of responses. And it is basically about the disagreement or the viewpoints of others. And so when you're looking at the definition according to the businessdirectory.com, it states conflict is friction or opposition resulting from actual or perceived differences or incompatibilities. So I just want you to really notice that word perceived. As coaches, we know that people's perceptions is their reality. If your team's perception of a person is negative, then they're going to breathe that negativity and bring it to the conflict or bring it to the issue and problem that you're having with that individual person. And that can hamper it because I already think that this person, they don't have attention to detail. I know they don't have attention to detail. I don't want to assign them any projects, and you as my manager keep asking me to assign them or delegate my stuff to them, and I don't want to, and that's going to breed that negativity. That's going to breed that conflict because I already have a negative view of this person. And so when people feel, basically the truth is about conflict, it arises out of personal values and clashing. People feel that what's most important to them has been dishonored. So just like that piece, I value having my work high quality. So I want someone with a high attention to detail. And you as my manager, you keep making me give this work or delegate this work to someone else. So you're not valuing me. You're not valuing what I hold dear and what I find important. And that's when that conflict arises. So let's talk about a scenario. And so in this scenario, there's two employees and they have the same access to the information in the account. James sent an email to all of the account managers and asking for clarifying on a question that he had about about one particular account. Sean did a reply all, so that reply went to all of the account managers in the company, and this is how Sean replied. So go ahead and read that. If you think that this was a positive response to James' question, go ahead and use the man at the top and click agree. If you feel like this could maybe breed some hurt feelings, go ahead and select disagree. Okay, I definitely see some people. Okay, we have some agrees, we have some disagrees. It looks like the disagrees are winning. And the people, and you can all still keep voting. The people that selected agree or disagree, go ahead and type in why did you select your answer? Like what made you feel like this was a positive experience or a positive email or a negative email, or and was it a word or was it the reply all? What exactly do you think was the reason for this? Or the reason for your answer, excuse me. And just to let you know, this is an actual scenario. There is no room for others' opinion. Yes. Thank you, Vanessa. So Vanessa said that Sean said, this is it. There is no other. The information was factual and appropriate, and it would help reduce the workload. Thank you, Jen. Jen, I was just giving you the information. You asked the question, and I was giving you the clarifying information that you needed. Perfect, Jen. So this is an actual scenario, and what happened was the person that sent the email was saying, hey, this was the tone that she wanted James to read this email in. Hey, actually, you know what? Upon reading that note in the account, we just need to invoice them every quarter instead of every month. That was the tone she meant for James to read the email. This is the tone that James read the email in. Actually, if you would have just opened up the account, you would have seen that the information was in there. See below, this is the note that's in the account. Please invoice them every quarter instead of every month. So you can see, and I see, thank you, Teresa, just giving instructions on the email. Exactly. So we can see how this one little email caused a lot of conflict, and it did. It caused a whole bunch of conflict because now James has hurt feelings. Sean is confused as to what's going on. I'm just trying to help you help your client, and why are you going to the boss talking about that I'm yelling at you and I'm demeaning you and I'm not respecting you? It was a whole big blow up, and this was the email that caused everything. Now, of course, once we got into it, got into this conversation a little bit, I uncovered that yes, there was a lot of other underlining issues that came about because the reason that James read Sean's email with an attitude initially is because James had some unresolved issues with Sean that kind of crept up or came up when he was reading the email. So sometimes, and we're going to discuss this as well in the presentation, that the initial catalyst is not the thing that actually is the reason why. It's just what got the ball rolling in regards to having the conflict come outward, because you have some people on staff, and when I'm talking to my clients, I talk about this all the time, that sometimes you have people that are a little more reserved, and so they let things build up, build up, build up, build up, and then there's this big explosion. And this is exactly what happened between the James and Sean scenario. And don't worry, the names have been changed to protect the innocent in this situation. And so let's talk about some of those other fire starters or things that can kind of get that ball rolling in regards to conflict. One of the conflict catalysts is poor communication. And this is one of the main causes of conflict between employees in the workplace, just like that email. It went out simply on one side, but it was not received that way. We at the Omnia Group believe communication is so important. That's why when you're getting our reports, we have a big section just in regards to communication, because like my mom and dad used to say, it's not always what you say, it's how you say it. And understanding each other's communication style is essential in regards to not having these emails read with an attitude. That's why we also here outside of all of our offices at the Omnia Group, we have our pattern. So you know what type of communicator I am. And when I go talk to our benchmarking specialist, Cynthia Brooks, I know that she's more of that analytical, fact-oriented type of communicator. So I can't go over there and say, Cynthia, you did so wonderful. Good morning. I love the way you handled that. Awesome job. And walk out, because that means nothing to her. I'm going to get the eye roll and kind of like, Tanya, could you just close my door? Or Tanya, could you take it down because you have way too much caffeine and I haven't had any. So simmer down. Take that down from a 10 to a 2, please. And so understanding how to communicate with your employees, with your peers, is going to be essential. Because what happens is if we don't communicate, then the gossip mill's starting. And we all know that the gossip is usually worse than it really is. Like I remember one time I had to, excuse me, when a company that I was working for, we everyone did the same job. So everyone was doing everything. And then management came in and decided to separate the task out, separate out the responsibilities. And so they just said, okay, you're going to do that, you're going to do that, and you're going to do this. And so the people in our group, we were like, well, did we do something wrong? We must not be doing everything right if they think that we can't handle it. And so management didn't necessarily communicate that they thought that this was a great idea, because now, we're pulling to your strengths and we're going to have you focus on this area of the business because you're really strong at attention to detail. So I'm going to have you do all of the analytics. I'm going to have you do the Excel spreadsheets, all of that data, facts, figures information, because you're great on that side. They didn't communicate it that way. So we had a bunch of hurt feelings. And we actually had one person that left because they didn't understand. Eventually, it did come out that is the reason why they did that. So you can understand how poor communication can definitely affect your bottom line, can affect your engagement, can affect, the morale within your office. The next catalyst is difference in personalities, and that speaks directly to what I talk about every day with all of my clients in regards to personalities and behaviors, because you have a lot of different people in your office. And so there's 17 different behavioral or personality styles they can fall within, and all of those personality styles come with their strengths, come with their challenges, and some of that personality is, it's their innate, it's their natural tendency. So this is where they feel most comfortable. This is what they're going to, this is who they are. So understanding the differences and celebrating those differences and making those differences work for you can be beneficial. But when team members don't understand the nuances of everyone, that's where some of that challenge can come in. That's where some of that conflict can creep up. I've had a couple of studies that I've done, excuse me, a couple of sessions that I've done with clients where they just profiled their whole team. And we did a team analysis and dynamic report for them in regards to letting them know where the strengths are, where the challenges are, how each person should communicate, or what's the best way to communicate with each other. And that can help stop a lot of the conflict, because once I understand, then okay, now I know how to approach you. Now I know that you may read that email as, being a little defensive when it's really not. So I need to soften my approach. I need to soften how I send things out. So understanding that piece is is very important. Also, closely related to personalities and behaviors is also different values. It differs within the workplace. A difference in values is seen clearly especially when we're talking about a generational excuse me, when you have multiple generations within the organization, that can be a difference in values. And so that can sometimes breed some conflict. And so you want to understand that. And once again, when you have differences, you always want to celebrate them and help everyone on the team understand what this is bringing to what they're bringing to the table, what part their puzzle is playing in the great piece of making this company dynamic and productive. The last catalyst that you'll have is competition. And I'm not saying all competition is bad. Sometimes it's great to have a little competition. I know when I was a sales manager, I brought in a new salesperson and it pumped up my whole sales team, because that person was a go-getter. She was dynamic and great. And while my team was okay, it just helped them step up their game. And it's not like I pitted one person against the other, because that's when you start getting into unhealthy competition. But when you just have someone that's doing a great job and they can see that, having little contests, but nothing that's going to demean or devalue anyone else on your team. It can, but when you have that unhealthy type of competition, it can cause employee conflict. Some industries foster that competitive environment. I can think of one right now, and probably everyone else can too: sales. Sales fosters that. You want that competitive, but you want to make sure that it doesn't turn over into a negative. When competition is not properly managed, it can result in employees sabotaging or insulting one another, which creates hostile work environments, and also not a great experience for the customer either. If you have, salespeople that are, trying to step on everyone to get to the top, that's going to come out in front of the customer as well, and they could actually be pushing some customers away. So if we don't get a hold of that, that can be a problematic in regards to making your company more profitable. Now, when we're thinking about other don'ts that we don't, that we don't want to do, is one, especially in leadership and management, and if you are a team member as well, you don't want to be defensive. And there is a column here at the Omnia Group, because we typically speak in columns, but it's the column 8, and they are sometimes sensitive to criticism and rejection. So that's just their natural tendency. So their innate natural behavior is sometimes that they can be sensitive to criticism and rejection. And this is probably the person, and please raise your hand if you've ever, went to someone, had a discussion, and then when you left, they thought that you were yelling at them or that you were berating them and you were really just trying to give them information? Okay, yes, I see hands going up everywhere. I think almost everyone has raised their hand. And so some of that is one, the person that you're talking to, they're just naturally prone to be that way a little bit, right? So they have to understand that. So this is why I'm talking about not only for the leaders, but also you as the participant in this in the team. Try not to be defensive. Try to first think maybe they're not talking about me personally. It's not a personal attack, but it's really they're trying to they're trying to make me better. Rather than understanding the complaints of a partner or his or her viewpoint, defensive people steadfastly deny their wrong behavior. That can sometimes be the other reason for being defensive. Oh, it wasn't me, it was somebody else. I didn't do it. No, you didn't give me enough information. You've probably had that conversation, especially as a manager. You've had someone say, "Nope, you told me wrong. That's not what you told me." Nope, I don't believe that. And that's their defense mechanism is, I'm trying to stop from getting hurt because you're telling me that I'm doing something wrong. So you want to make sure, that you're not defensive. And that can sometimes, you're giving the information, you have someone that's being defensive, then you start getting defensive, and then guess what? Nothing's going to work because now we have two defensive people and all they're doing is just trying to defend their position and not hearing the other person's point. So you want to make sure that, we are not defensive. Next, don't overgeneralize. While addressing complaints, a person should not use generalizations. For example, he or she should avoid starting sentences with "you always, you never." I think our parents always said that. I know my parents said, "So you always, so this always happens to you? You've never?" And so I'm like, "Okay, mom, dad, whatever. You always come home late or you never do what you want to do." It's irritating to the other person bringing up past conflicts that can increase, the level of the current conflict. And also when you just say always, never, it nothing always or nevers. So don't overgeneralize. Make sure that you're understanding what the person is saying and their feelings. Next, don't forget to listen. Sometimes, especially in the heat of battle, well, let's say conflict, that you can sometimes just, you're waiting for that person to be quiet so you can say your piece because you don't want to lose your point because you have a great counterpoint to whatever they said and this is da 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 da. And so you want to make sure. So like sometimes it could just sound like a fire rapid of words just coming out. So don't forget to listen. Some people are not good listeners. They interrupt, roll their eyes, release whatever they're going to say next. People should develop the listening skills to strengthen the communication process. Communication is a two-way street. So you want to listen as much as you talk. Or sometimes it might be you need to listen more than you talk. It really depends on the conversation that you're having, but it should be at least 50-50. That, 50-50, everybody should have a fair chance to speak. But don't forget to listen because within those words, you can probably hear what the concern is and what the problem is. And then lastly, try to win. Don't try to win just because you want to win. Winning at all costs is not great. People who are focused on winning the argument can lose the relationship. There should be a mutual understanding and respect for everyone, and people should be able to reach the agreement together. And so that leads us into the different conflict styles when we're talking about the win-win, the win-lose, lose-lose type of situations. By example, by examining the widely accepted conflict developed by two behavioral scientists, actually. One is Kenneth Thomas and the other one is Ralph Kilman. This is a widely accepted different conflict styles. The first one is avoiding. And so with avoiding, you have no winners, no losers. I lose, you lose. It's avoidance. So it's basically depending on how you want to look at it. There's no winners or we both lose. So avoidance is characterized by deliberately ignoring or withdrawing from the conflict rather than facing it. And all of these that I'm going to talk about, they have pros and they have cons. all of them that I talk about, there are some instances where you will use these, and then some you might want to figure out, oh, maybe I should use this type of conflict style to help me get through this piece. And we're going to discuss each one of these. The next one is competing, and that is a I win, you lose type of situation. It's a competitive style, an attempt to gain power and pressure a change at the other person's expense. The third one is collaborating. It's a I win, you win, demonstrates that you are willing to sacrifice some of your goals while persuading others to give up part of theirs. And then the next one is compromising. So that one is I win some, you win some. And this is the one that you will hear most often. How many times, raise your hand if you've heard people say, we just need to compromise. We just need, everyone needs to give a little so we can win. And so, yes, I see hands going up. This is the most common. This is the one when you are looking at how to resolve conflict. This is the one that you see most often, but there's actually 5 different ways that you can handle conflict. And then lastly, it's accommodating. That is the I lose, you win. You set your own personal needs aside because you want to please the other person and to keep the ball rolling. And so you can see there's 5 different styles. And depending on the situation, you have to make a conscious choice on how to respond to others in a conflict to help reduce the work conflict. So you have to make that choice of which style works best for you, or which style works best, for the situation. And some of these styles will come more naturally to you based on your natural behavioral pattern. And so, if you are that more assertive, competitive, that competing one might be more natural for you, but you have to also pay attention to the other styles as well. So let's start out with avoiding. When using this conflict mode, a person knows that there is a conflict but decides not to deal with it by maybe ignoring it. I'm going to withdraw, I'm not really going to handle it. Avoiding conflict can be an appropriate choice, really depending on the circumstances. So first, let's talk about the advantages of, avoiding. First is the issue is trivial. We all probably said, you know what, this is not worth the fight. I don't need to move forward. It's too much time. It would take too much time out of my day and effort, and this is not the most productive use of my time. Next, cost outweighs the benefit. I mean, when the potential cost of confronting the conflict outweighs the benefit in addressing it, this requires assessment and judgment, meaning, you know what, this is, we can give them that win. It doesn't matter because for us to go and try to fix it, it's going to cost us way too much. Or and it buys you time. Think about when there's 2 people and they are heated and you can tell that the temperature is rising in the room. You may want to avoid at that moment. Let's avoid this topic. Let's stop this topic right now. So we're just going to avoid this and move on. And plus, that buys you time and gives angry people an opportunity to cool down so that the tensions can be reduced. And, it's important for the parties to take a break and to regain perspective and composure with the situation. We all probably had that experience where it's just like, hold up, let me just stop for a second because this is going way too far. Now, I think we can all think about the disadvantages of, decisions made by default because, if no decision is made, then there is actually a decision made. And so you want to think about that when you're thinking about using this style. Also, employee turnover. So if you never address my issue, if you never address my concern, then why am I staying here? Like I don't feel respected. And we all know people leave positions because of culture or because of management, not necessarily because of the job, because we all have to work somewhere, but we would rather work someplace that we love. And that's why we really focus on culture as well at the Omnia Group in regards to discussing with our clients how that person fits into the culture because no one likes employee turnover. We want to keep our retention rates high. And then lastly, when we talk about the disadvantage, blow ups. Like I stated earlier, you keep it under the surface, you keep it under the surface, you keep bearing it, bearing it, bearing, and then boom, yep, there you go, the blow up happens. And that's because we can only, a person can only take so much before things happen. And that blow up could be outwardly, that blow up could be them leaving, that blow up could have it could look many different ways, but none of them are necessarily positive. And so when you're thinking about avoiding the appropriate times for others, to use this is basically when there's a lot of heat, a lot of tension around, when the issue at hand is more of a smoke screen for the real problem. Like, okay, we're going to avoid this little bitty issue because we really need to get to the heart of the matter. Like that email. That email was the little issue. Let's avoid that email. That's done and gone. Let's go ahead and get to the heart of really why James is upset. Is upset. So when you think about avoiding, the tip is you want to sometimes you do need to kind of take your place at the table and just see what's happening here. And then when we're thinking about, avoiding, most of us would like to avoid conflict as much as possible. Raise your hand if you enjoy conflict. If you go into work every morning and say, I'm going to have some conflict today. Yeah, no, I don't see any hands going up on that one because no one wants to have conflict. In some cases, efforts to avoid conflict are fitting and effective because you want things to calm down. In other cases, avoiding conflict only contributes to the problem because you're letting it fester. And so, as management, you just want to understand when to avoid and when not to avoid, and understand the pros and cons of this style. And that lends us to the next style. The complete opposite of avoiding is going to be the competing. The competing is the power driven mode, being high in assertiveness and low in um, being cooperative. Excuse me. It puts parties in a win-lose situation where one attempts to achieve his or her goals over the other at the expense of the other person that's in this conflict. There is much consideration for feelings, views, or goals of the other party. Or excuse me, there's not much of that consideration actually. And so when we're thinking about the pros for this, with the competing, what do you think? Just type in. So we all know competing doesn't necessarily seem wonderful, but there are some advantages. So what do you think would be an advantage of using this competing style? So that somebody's in conflict and you needed to and you decided of all the five, this is the one that I decided to use. What do you think would be the reason that someone would use the competing? I can see there's not a lot of typing, and that's probably you're thinking, why would I want to compete? What would be that advantage? I totally understand why I don't see a lot of people typing. The advantage is a quick decision. Sometimes think about safety. I don't have time to sit there and collaborate and say, have a kumbaya moment when there's a safety concern. I need to do it immediately. I need a quick decision. I don't have time to discuss, avoid. The other ones do not play a part here. That's one of the reasons. Another is the outcome. The outcome is critical, and it and cannot be compromised. The decision is the decision. Like there is no black or white. There is no in or out. It's wrong or right. There's no gray. It is what it is. And then implementation. When we are implementing important but unpopular actions are needed, such as cost cutting, downsizing, enforcing rules, or administering discipline. There is it. It's kind of more of a direct type of conflict resolution piece, meaning that I I have to call you out or I have to give you feedback. I have to, write you up or do something of that nature because there was an issue. So there's really not any room for a lot of back and forth in regards to you did break the rules. I mean, you're supposed to be here at 9. You have been coming in at 8:30 and you do not have an excuse as to why, excuse me, you're supposed to be here at 9 and you've been coming in at 9:30 and you don't have a reason for why you're late every day. And so I have to implement this write up, or I have to implement this in your folder. So, of course, some of the disadvantages of competing is it strains relationships because leading to resentment and retaliation. If you are just always saying it's my way or the highway, guess what? You're going to have a lot of people going on the highway. If that's just your mode, no matter what the conflict is, no matter what the issue is, you only use this one way to handle issues within the organization, you're going to have some strained relationships and you're going to have low retention scores. Also, it causes intimidation. So, sometimes you have leaders who are leaders because their role says they are leaders. You have other leaders who are leaders because they that's just how they are. They are the people that you go to ask questions. It's the leaders that are the leaders because their role says they are the leaders, and then they handle themselves that way. Like, I have manager in my title, so I can rule the world. So sometimes when we have that competing, the disadvantage is that can cause some intimidation because you have to kind of bow down to them because of that role, and that's what the expectation is. And then also, it diminishes commitment. If I'm not a part of the solution, then I'm going to most likely be part of the problem because now I wasn't, you didn't take me in consideration when you made this decision. So why should I really work hard to make sure your vision comes to be? So that's why we always talking about trying to include others in decisions, getting others' opinions, but not every single time can we, like I said before, if it's a safety issue or concern, then this is probably the best one to go with. And other times you would want to use this is when being right matters more than preserving the relationship with the other party. If you don't care about that relationship, then sure, use this one. You'll get your way and you won't have that relationship anymore. So you kind of have to weigh that odds. And then the other, when you know you are right and you are doing the correct thing. That one's kind of hard, meaning sometimes we always think we are right, but if you're using this and that's why you're using it, it's because you know you're right. I hopefully you have done your due diligence and researched on both sides. And then, each party, when you're talking about competing, each party really needs to understand the facts as well as the impact. And now, when we're talking about collaborating, the advantage is, you have shared outcomes, meaning that you have a lot of people coming together. So that's wonderful because there's a lot of different ideas and perspectives, as well as it builds a foundation for collaborating in the future. Because this is the one that most sources, when you're reading anything about leadership, management, organizational change, personal or professional development, this is the one that they talk about. And so one of the advantages are you can really start that process by using this tool. The disadvantage, however, is it can take time because if I have to go over there and get Debbie's opinion and then I have to get Jen's opinion and Lisa's opinion and we all have to come together. Now I'm sending out invites, Outlook invites to see, do you have time this day? Do you have time that day? Can we have this think tank? Collaborating can sometimes take time. And then dominant personalities in that collaboration can sometimes kind of steer the ship. And so we want to make sure that we're mindful of that. And then commitment. You want to make sure that because their idea wasn't really the one that was chosen, that everybody is truly on board in regards to making this project happen. And so when we're thinking about, this collaborating, this is the one that you will use probably most often than any of the other ones. And so there's a many situations when you would want to use the collaborating. When you're thinking about creating a new marketing plan, when you're thinking about rolling something out for next year, because we are coming into the end of the year. This is a great time to start thinking about what's going on next year, how we're going to roll it out, what does it look like. And so collaborating, that's why one of those disadvantages is because it does take time to make those things happen. And then when you're in that collaboration, you want to make sure you identify the main concerns of all parties to succeed. You want to make sure everyone is being heard. That's how we are going to kind of help stop some of the disadvantages of that collaborating style. Next is the accommodating style. And this is the one where, of the five conflicts, accommodating, or sometimes you might see it as harmonizing, is viewed as the peacekeeper. It's focused more on preserving the relationship than actually achieving personal goals or results, what you wanted out of it. So this is where you lose, they win. So the advantage is it does preserve the harmony. It sometimes smooths things over, will protect more important issues while giving up some less important ones. It just preserves the harmony. And then it gives you leverage. You can think of it this way because now, well, and we've probably all used this one before. I know I have. Well, I did give you in on that point, so I think I should be able to do this. I know sometimes I'll be like, well, I know we went to go see that movie you wanted last time, so now I think we should go see this movie. But, so that does give you a little leverage. So that's some of that accommodating. Also, it keeps things on track. Let's not focus on, if we know that we're not going to move past it, that like this is the person's line in the sand, they think that this is the most important detail. So, okay, fine. If it's not detrimental, okay, let's move on so we can keep things on track. The con for the accommodating is because you kind of gave in, it's kind of a false solution. You're not really most likely resolving the core issue at hand. You're just like, I'm just going to preserve the harmony and just keep it. Okay, go ahead. Accountability concerns, because now who's going to be responsible for all the work, or what are the solution that's coming out of it, the work towards the solution, who's responsible for that? And because it's one-sided, the other side could feel hurt. And I've talked about this a couple of times before. When we don't voice our complaints are issues, things can kind of blow up. And so with using accommodating all the time, things can start to blow up. And because everyone's feeling like, oh, it's just about them. It's not about me. And so when preserving or building the relationship, it's more important than winning the issue at hand. So you want to think about, the accommodating conflict style. When is it best? Am I okay not not winning this round? Am I okay to move on? You know, you also may want to use this when a person realizes that they are wrong and that the alternate position is better. This is kind of a way for you to save face because you're like, okay, yeah, let's go ahead and do it your way. Now you've kind of saved face. You didn't have to say that you were wrong because sometimes it's hard for people to admit that they're wrong. So just choose the accommodating style. So basically, the accommodating person serves many positive roles in the relationship and also in the organization. People who prefer to serve others before themselves help will help get things started, help get the ball rolling. They are important in regards to smoothing things out and making sure that everything is running. And but I just caution that if you don't kind of speak up, things can blow up, but you also want to know when to let it rest, like when to move on and say, okay, this is fine. I'll let this one go. The last style is compromising. So the use of compromise is a common solution to resolving disagreements. While it may produce an agreement, compromise does not always resolve the problems either. That contains, because there's some underlying things you haven't really gotten to the heart of the matter. So when we're looking at the advantages, compromise is a quick settlement. Okay, fine. You give, I give, we're good. And then it breaks deadlocks. And then also it helps, in regards once again to save face as well. So when you're thinking about compromising, excuse me, when you're thinking about compromising, once again, no one had to give everything. So we both get to save face. We're on the other side, just one person was saving face. But this one, everyone gets to save face. And then the disadvantages is because I had to give up, I'm not and I wasn't necessarily comfortable. So I'm not necessarily building trust because I had to give up something. And then when we're talking about compromising, it requires a lot of monitoring because we want to make sure that what we set up, the solution that we had, is actually being done. And so you need an accountability buddy to make sure that things are happening. And then because, if everyone just keeps giving in, if we keep compromising, we may actually lose focus of the goal and may not reach the goal because we all gave in way too much and we're not where we need to be. And so typically when you would use compromise is when the general welfare of the organization will benefit from both parties giving some of their demands. When basically you've aired out the differences and there's a need to move forward. So I had a situation um, when I worked at this other company that where we just had a miscommunication. It just, what I thought was going to happen was not what they thought was going to happen. And so we both aired our grievances. I've said, well, you remember when you told me this is what I said. And so that person said, well, you remember when you said that, this is what I said. And so it was a compromise. It was like, okay, we both understood each other and we were able to move on, no hard feelings. And so that's typically when you would use that compromising conflict style. So it's typically not the ideal process for resolving disputes as it requires both sides to give up something in order to reach an agreement. And this result, neither parties being truly satisfied, which can have some hurt feelings. The abilities for the parties to agree, to disagree, and come to basically the conclusion that compromise is in the best interest of both will contribute to the success. So you have to get everyone to basically agree that this is how we're going to move past this and move on to the next. And so now we've kind of talked about the 5 different styles that you can use. Now let's talk about the leadership's role in that style. So no matter which style you use, you're going to have to do these 4 things. You're going to have to ask questions. You're going to have the WIIFM, and then view conflict as an opportunity, and then also value your team members. So when we talk about the leadership role and we talk about the questions, there's 2 questions that you truly want to ask yourself. One, are you capable of managing your own opinions? We all have our own opinions, but you can't let your personal feelings get in between the disagreeing parties. I know as a manager, I have thought, well, yeah, Kim is right. That does make more sense than what John is saying. But I have to let each person kind of air out their grievances, air out their piece. I can't go ahead and jump in and say, no, Kim is right. Next is, does the conflict situation involve you as the employee's direct manager? Now, if it involves you, this can sometimes make it a little trickier because now the person that's in conflict, they're in conflict with you. And sometimes it may help to bring a third party in to kind of help in regards to having that discussion, having that mediator. And now when we talk about the other one, the WIIFM, and we all know that stands for the what is in it for me factor. Understanding the other person's what's in it for me position is critical. It's absolutely essential to understand where everyone is coming from. If we can get to the heart of the value of what piece of this situation that they value, then we will start uncovering the core issue and we won't have to deal with these little emails that blow up, that create all of this confusion or conflict within the organization. So if you approach conflict from the perspective of taking the action that will help others best achieve their goals, then you will find very few obstacles. And so you want to make sure that everyone, one, knows what the other person, what value the other person is placing on the situation. And once you get to that point, then you can start unraveling and help with the conflict and go with the appropriate conflict mode that best works for you. And then value. We all want value. We all want to feel value. So, a leader, you have to make sure that every team member feels value. That's why excuse me, one of our developmental reports, we just talk about, the person's strengths and challenges. And this report is meant to be shared with the employee. So you as the leader, one, you'll find out their strengths and challenges. Then you're able to give them constructive feedback. You're able to help them with that development plan. But then what I've had a lot of clients do is they kind of have a room where the whole team gets together and kind of share their profiles, or we'll have a webinar for them in regards to where it's kind of like a team dynamic analysis webinar where everyone's in the room and we can all talk back and forth in regards to this, in regards to the team and their communication style. So giving that feedback, whether it's from you verbally, is one way, or giving them that report that that openly talks about what they're bringing to the table is essential. And then, you want to listen. You want to make sure that you're adding value. And the way you do that is by making sure that your people hear, that your people, excuse me, feel that you are listening to them, that you are hearing what they have to say. So you want to listen to you want to listen to their concerns, listen to what's important to them, listen to where they want to go with the company, and that can help in regards to conflict. Because if I'm in a position and I really want to move to another position, but I'm just stuck here and I've kind of told my manager that I'm looking for growth, but it doesn't seem like, she's doing anything to help me move forward in that plan, that's going to cause conflict because now my feelings are going to be hurt. So now I'm going to be the one probably sending out the email to someone because I'm internalizing it. And so the way you see it outside is by me lashing out, from an email or things like that. And so listening to your people is essential. Also, sharing. You want to share your knowledge. You want to share your concerns. You want to share with them. Make this like we are all part of this team. Yes, I might have manager in my title, but that doesn't mean anything to me because I want us to be, one cohesive group. So you want to be able to share. And that will add value. So giving the feedback, listening and sharing will add value to each team member. And once that team member feels valued by you, their manager, that's going to be essential in regards to helping conflict move in a positive direction, because conflict isn't necessarily all bad. From conflict, you can get some great ideas because think about that collaboration conflict, Sal. If you have that time to have that think tank and bring all of these ideas of, we're looking at this new marketing plan and we want to break into a new industry, how can we do that? If you have that collaboration, and the way you're going to get that collaboration is by everybody feeling that they are a valuable component to this team. And you do that by giving them feedback, listening, and sharing. The next piece is opportunity, and kind of opportunity gives you that growth. Conflict provides the opportunity for growth. Unresolved conflict can ripple your operation and, basically cause it to shut down. And so you want conflict involves learning and how to cooperate. Conflict and cooperation are essential for growth, and that's what and that's what conflict can provide to you if it's managed professionally, and appropriately. Communication. I know you've probably heard me say communication 8,000 times because that is how important communication is. I spend almost my whole day talking to clients when they're reading our report and and talking about the communication style, because this is where you're going to win or lose, is through this communication piece. Conflict can positively impact, conflict can positively impact communication. It can also be the warning sign that, hey, there's something going on. Communication can be your yellow flashing sign. If you're having meetings and all of a sudden no one's talking, then there's a problem. And it's not just because, they're tired or disinterested, there's something issue. There's something brewing. So there's something on the horizon, and it might not be a great thing. And so if you see communication stop, if you see people not giving as much as they were giving, then there's some conflict that's happening, and you want to investigate that. And we've had a client that they definitely saw that there was, like we used to go out, or we used to have team building, and now nobody wants to have the team building. And so what we did was we did the Omnia Group survey for them, and we're going out and presenting, excuse me, and having sessions with them every quarter in regards to helping to get them back on track. And so the surveys are anonymous, so the employees felt really open in regards to the information that they shared with us. And that's how we were able to build a strong training deck for them for the next year. And so, having that information was essential to management and leadership because they wanted to get their company back on track, and communication is the first way to do it. Then you have productivity. Conflict can give you productivity because now we are not sitting there at the water cooler, hashing out I don't know why Sean sent me that email. That's so bad and negative. Sean is always just saying bad things, and I can't believe she did that. So instead of sitting at the water cooler, now we're sitting at our desk because we're happy and we're working and we're not spending time on things that we don't need to. And then you have engagement because now we're productive, we're happy, everybody's making money, we're doing, the team building. You're giving me feedback, I'm feeling invigorated by the process, and all that comes from conflict. And when it's handled properly, all of these great things can happen when we're handling conflict properly. And when we think about the strategies in regards to managing conflict, there's, four things that you really want to think about. One is that fine line of letting them handle it, letting the two employees kind of hash it out, and then me getting involved. Just like you remember, if you all are parents out there, sometimes you kind of let the kids fight it out, but then you have to know when to step in. You don't want conflict to go into the destructive realm. You want to keep it on the positive side, and that's a fine line. You want to also establish ground rules. Everyone must be respectful. I mean, it's basically things your mom and dad taught you: be kind, be courteous. So you want to make sure those rules are established. And you want to stay impartial. You don't want to take sides. You don't want someone to feel like they are the golden child and then that they can rule the world. And when that happens within a team, that team is going to suffer, because if one person feels like they're special and everyone sees that management treats them as such, that's going to be hard to really help conflict stay on the positive side. And then lastly, you want to identify those fire starters. When people are stressed out, overtired, if you're, tax time, if you're on the CPA side, if you're on the insurance side, October, this last quarter, was probably rough for you, especially if you're doing employee benefits, because everyone has their open enrollment around the same time. So those are the fire starters. Those are the things that can breed that conflict because we're all feeling so much pressure to get things done. And so you just want to know them, identify them, recognize them, talk to your team saying, I know we're getting ready to come into a tough time, but please, come to me if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. And then when we're thinking about what conflict can positively sway communication, because it's not how you say it, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Make your meetings more productive because now you're having a lot of conversation, and because conflict can be a positive piece. And also you alert you to your low employee engagement, because when conflict, it kind of works both ways. When there's a lot of conflict, that can be positive, but when there's no conflict, that can be negative as well, because that means no one cares. Not everyone is going to get along all the time or have the same great ideas and every idea is a winner. there is going to be some conflict. So it works both ways. When there's a lot of conflict, there's a concern. When there's no conflict, there's a concern. Because remember, you have 17 different personality styles that can be working together. And these personality styles will have different ideas. So you want to think about it that way. As we come to a close, you want to think about using conflict as a springboard to get things started, to have conversations, to get brainstorming sessions going. You want to think about conflict and how to communicate. Communication is the key, and that is the foundation to everything. You also want to think about separate people from the problem, meaning she is not a bad person. She just struggles with attention to detail. Those are two different things. He cannot, he is horrible and he's slow. It's not that he's slow. He just is more methodical and routine oriented. So we need to figure out how to set him up for success in regards to maybe creating priority checklists for him. Also, you want to listen. This is, listen for the silence and listen for the words. If there's too much silence, there's a problem. If there's too many words, there's a problem. So you want to understand both in regards to conflict. So it works both ways. Too much or too little, there's probably a problem there. And as we come to a close and as you start typing in your questions, I once read a quote that said, conflict is inevitable, but combat is optional. So you want to stay conflict on the positive side. We don't want to get into that combative mode. And you can go ahead and type in your questions. I want to thank you all for joining me today. We have started, you can start registering for our webinars next year. The one next year is going to be 7 things you need to do to develop your team, which is a nice springboard from this conflict, because first you have the conflict and now we're going to talk about how to develop the team. We also have, like us on Facebook or LinkedIn, and subscribe to our webinars on YouTube. We record every session. And if you want to learn about those behavioral assessments, meaning, you want to find out how to communicate with my employee, or you have 2 employees that are always battling, helping them come together and understanding their communication style, definitely click on that link. The presentation is in the takeaways. You can go ahead and download the presentation slides as well as some communication tips, because if you didn't know that, I feel communication is very important. And then conflict resolution strategies and giving you an action plan in regards to how to move forward. I want to thank you all for joining me today. It has been a wonderful Lunch and Learn year for us, 2017. This is the last one for the year, but please register for the one next year, and I look forward to speaking with you all in 2018. Everyone have a great end of the year.